Hello and welcome back to this damnful idealistic crusade. With my recent reviewing and rewatching the entire Godfather trilogy and thinking about the film and its 50th anniversary, I of course became fascinated as always whenever I think about the film about the whole world of the Godfather, its production. Of course, Mario Puzo's original novel, which is an excellent, wonderful read. It's still a great novel in its own right, but also the all the various watching through all the extras and listening to Coppola's commentaries again, it made me start thinking about all the books on The Godfather, of which there are actually quite a good number of them. Unfortunately, not all of them are in print, and I've only read select volumes and things. But I wanted to talk about the two that I did look at, and one I reread, and a newer one that I finally got to read at this time. This is really just a book review of, I think, two of the best books to have in terms of wanting to know more about the making of The Godfather and the sort of the effect the film and the two sequels has had on not just the cinematic landscape, but pop culture in general. So really, the key volume now is actually the new volume, which is entitled Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli, of course, which I have here, which is by Mark Seal. It was done in about 2019 or so. And this focuses entirely on the making of, production, and people behind the original Godfather film and the story of its making in as much of a no-holds-barred approach than I've really ever seen before, because Seal did reference a lot of the other books on the Godfather and actual personnel reports and books that others of the actual crew had written, and then all the various news stories and things. So I think this is probably the best overall combination and sort of distilling of all the various sources and stories, and also all the anecdotes, and being able to sift through the anecdotes and find the nuggets of truth in them, or that some anecdotes are entirely apocryphal and don't really have any basis in fact. So this is a wonderful resource now, and it's a really gripping read, because it does actually start in the introduction and the closing in the present day of when it was written. And Seal actually went and interviewed Robert Evans, really the studio man behind the whole film and part of a lot of the magical success for the film, but also a lot of the great amount of conflict that erupted over the film, and no one being able to really agree, I think, on what it was that it was actually desired. But it was this sort of pressure cooker that built, that made one of the greatest films of all time, and this is something that did not exist on the sequel, because Francis Ford Coppola was able to basically say, if I'm coming back, I'm doing it my way, and you're going to leave me alone. And that's why The Godfather 2 has a different sort of feel in ways, I think, because it wasn't a overbearingly stressful production of thinking you're going to be fired every day. And also on top of that, this book actually does go into the actual real-life mafia connections of both pre-production and production. And again, it is doing a wonderful job at sifting through all the anecdotal stories and trying to get at the real heart of the matter, and just how much was this a worry for the production crew, and what things did they actually have to do to actually get the film made, and how it did get kind of leery in some places, where they really did have to walk a very fine line and deal with actual real life, people who weren't quite like what were being depicted in the film. So real life entered into the production of The Godfather in a very interesting way. And again, this book is the first time where you've, I think, really got a great single volume that gets all of this material in. You've got great making of bits and great production stories, but you've also got stories about the outside realm surrounding the production, and then also stories about back at the studio and what Paramount was going through. And you also get it's kind of like when they have the Corleone family map in Godfather Part 2 in the big hearing with everyone lined up, and then all the sections of the family under the Corleone leadership. Well, you can kind of look at that and sort of reference all the characters and players in the book telling the story. So you can kind of look at all the different factions and imagine in your head the sort of family tree map of the making of The Godfather. And on one side, you've got all of the real world the people wanting to influence the production. You've got Paramount on one side, you've got Coppola in the middle, and then it's an interconnected and interwoven tree of sorts. So I thought that was an amusing sort of parallel that you could make. It seems rather natural. This is, I think, now again the single best volume if you want to know more about The Godfather, and it's a very engrossing read. It's well written and put together, and Mark Seal references a lot of the various Godfather volumes of the past. And if you look at the sort of appendix at the end and you look at the works cited, basically it's the checklist of all the Godfather books you should probably read, and a lot of the ones I haven't gotten to yet. So looking through that, it made me just go, darn, there's so many more Godfather books than I realized. The only real downside, I think, is that it's just about the first film. There's not really anything about part 2 outside of a couple mentions, and there's nothing about part 3. And both of those would make for fascinating making of books. So this is, again, really just the story of the first film and the aftermath. And, there's a little bit of Godfather Part 2 talk, and maybe a couple mentions of Godfather Part 3, but it just left me wanting more, because then I just wanted another book about Part 2 and Part 3. And any other bits of Godfather lore and the fourth film that never got made, and all that stuff, which you can find out information about, but this book is so well done that it just left me wanting more. And so that's why I think it's important to mention the other Godfather book that's been a standard for a long time, which is Harlan Lebo's, I think it's from 1997, The Godfather Legacy, which was done for the 25th anniversary. I feel old now. But this is a great making of volume, very well written and very nice, and a very nice, simple, straightforward, down-to-earth style. But it's loaded with great stills, and it basically goes through a lot of the same information, but just not in the same level of sort of putting your nose in the dirt and reveling in all of the interpersonal relationships that Seal's book does. And also, it doesn't go into the same level of detail about the potential real-life mafia connections. So that's why Seal's book is so important. But it does continually reference and use Godfather Legacy as one of the key sources. So if you have Godfather Legacy and you've read it, you're going to recognize a lot of the same material, which you'd also recognize from going through the DVD and Blu-ray extras of the film. But Godfather Legacy is still a great volume to have. It's very, extremely inexpensive on the used market, and it's also got a little section on Part 2 and Part 3. They're much smaller because the book is focused primarily on Part 1, but there is a little bit of discussion of Part 2 and Part 3. I'd say its real strength, besides the nice photos and the very inexpensive price, is that the Godfather Legacy does get a little bit more into the actual nuts and bolts making up material here and there, whereas, again, Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli is much more about the struggle to get the film made. So they do cover a lot of the same ground, but I think both are essential for Godfather fans. I think they do complement each other very well, and Godfather Legacy has been around for so long that I think most Godfather fans know it pretty well or have had a copy for years. So to actually talk about the books themselves, Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli. It's got a nice cover design. It's embossed on the cover, and I do like how they've taken a camera to actually make it look like the puppeteer strings with the hand. It's well done. It's very, very nice, very, very effective, and kind of cheeky in a fun way. There's also a nice bit of texturing on the actual cover, which is nice. Makes it feel a bit fancier. And there is a little photo section in the middle. It's a mixture of black and white and color photographs. So for those who always want some sort of picture representation, you do have that here in the center of the book. This does feel very much like what you're seeing now pop up with a lot of these making of books dedicated to a single film. like the books on High Noon and The Searchers and a few other films. So it clocks in at a little over 400 pages. So, it will, it is a book you can pour over, and this is a book you will definitely want to have on your film reference shelf. Now, The Godfather Legacy is available as this nice trade softcover. Again, it's very inexpensive. It's been around for a long time, and it's such a nice sort of standard reference source that I think, along with the fact that it's so cheap nowadays, no fan of The Godfather should be without a copy of this. Again, I think this may, I don't know if this had a hardcover printing. It may have at some point, and I wish this would actually get upgraded. Harlan Lebo has done books on Casablanca and Citizen Kane, and his Citizen Kane one did get upgraded, so they could potentially do an upgrade to this at some point, but this is still nicely done, very effective. But what this does is it sort of has a slight coffee table book feel because of the stills, but there is, still a healthy balance of stills and text. All the stills in this are in black and white, but they do look really effective in terms of how they're done. Let me see if I can get to here's one of the double page spreads. So there are double page spreads in addition to single page photos, and then actual candid stills, and then even bits of actual production set stills, which are always fascinating. So you can actually get this and just have it for the imagery, even though it's all in black and white. It's well done. And then you basically spend about 200 or some odd pages on The Godfather itself, and then you get to the last section, which does discuss part 2 and part 3, and at least some nice bit of detail, and then you have the actual production credits. So it clocks in at a little under 300 pages, and I just think it makes a nice companion piece to the newer volume. So if you were to have any one book on The Godfather and you didn't want to spend a lot of money and you wanted something that talked about all three films, The Godfather Legacy is still a great choice. So those are my thoughts on the two Godfather books that I read after looking at the films again for the 50th anniversary and getting sucked into the Godfather world yet again. But I thought it would be interesting to talk about them a little bit and why I think they really complement each other very well. So if you're just getting into looking more closely at the world of the Godfather films and want to know more than what's in the official DVD and Blu-ray releases, this is a great place to start. Again, there are many other books and stories on the making of The Godfather and the trilogy, but this, I think, is the great starting point. Unfortunately, not all of the books on The Godfather are still in print, so some you will have to track down if you're becoming more of a Godfather fanatic, as you probably will be. And this is just merely a suggestion of a starting off point, and these are just the books I had on hand to read this time around, and I was really impressed by Leave the Gun, Take the Cannoli, that it was so well done and put together, and a nice distillation of all the various stories and elements, and the people especially. You get a great sense of all the people involved, which is something that not a lot of making of books do very well, and it's pretty much the most important part. So it was rewarding to read a good modern book on a single film. If I did have any sort of criticism, it would be, of course, that it doesn't get into part 2 and part 3 all that much, and maybe it focuses a little bit too much on the interpersonal relationships and not as much on the day-to-day nuts and bolts of the technical production information, which is why I think having Godfather Legacy is a nice sort of supplement. And of course, the new book does frequently refer back to Godfather Legacy, so you'll recognize a lot of the same material. So they complement each other well, and Godfather Legacy is so inexpensive these days. You can get it in most bookstores for, a couple dollars, or on eBay for, practically nothing. So it's a nice volume to have on hand if you're a fan of the films. So these were just my thoughts on these two particular books about the making of the Godfather films. Excellent reads for any fan of the films, and I think musts for any Godfather fans. So this is just another video in my continuing Godfather coverage since I became immersed in the world of the Godfather yet again after the 50th anniversary and revisiting the films. This is usually what I do. I revisit a film and then I just bury myself in books and articles and videos and any bit of material I can get on that same film and any related subject, and I just immerse myself in it. And I just can't stop ever thinking about The Godfather, because it's one of those life-changing cinematic experiences that never leaves you and never leaves the popular consciousness either, which is why it's still with us in 2023. So I hope this has been at least somewhat fun and informative. If you're looking at trying to read any books on The Godfather, I think these are the best places to start. And as always, do keep supporting local independent bookstores by buying books, and keep reading print books, because print books are important. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.